but I predicted with shocking accuracy, by the way. If people were to go back and just read the statements and how it all played out so far, it has been to the T.
What's the benefit to someone besides network decentralization? Could you explain how an individual would utilize a node for their own benefit?
We have now reached the point of war. You don't get out of that without consequences. Bitcoin is losing a limb, period. The question is which limb?
The data suggests that real people are spending real money to buy real hardware and spin up a node.
Mostly what we have done as a company is upheld as our core principle is user sovereignty. That's what we stand for above everything else.
Today on the show, I have Matt Hill from Start9. So we start off with basically why run a node, what are nodes. I think there's a lot of misunderstanding about the importance of running a node and being a participant in the Bitcoin network, but it gets spicy. We talk about BIP 110, knots versus core. And I think if you are new to this and all this sounds like a foreign language, you're going to come away with a lot of great takeaways from Matt. He's very insightful, has a firm stance, and I don't think he's shy about that, but you're going to really enjoy this episode. Hey, everyone. Like I said in the intro, I have Matt here with me. Matt, welcome back to the Bitcoin Way podcast.
Hey, happy to be back. Thanks.
Yeah, I'm excited for this chat. So we're going to jump right into, I think, one of the most important and fundamental aspects of Bitcoin. It's nodes. You know this is better than anyone else. You're building hardware to help people do that and obviously to do many other things. But we get asked all the time, why run a node? What is a node? How would you describe that to someone? I would love to hear your answer. And then we're going to talk a little bit more about the node wars and some of the other fun stuff that's been going on.
Yeah, great. So Bitcoin is a network of nodes. I mean, Bitcoin without nodes is not Bitcoin. It is an integral and sort of inherent aspect. Bitcoin is not just a currency and it's not just a mining operation, et cetera. I mean, Bitcoin is defined by a network of nodes that interact with one another for the purpose of enforcing a set of consensus rules, as well as propagating transactions around the world such that they can eventually be mined into blocks, and then also verifying and propagating blocks around the world to reach an eventually consistent state such that all nodes around the world know the same thing, but do not have to trust each other or anyone else in the process to know the thing that they know. So ultimately, the Bitcoin and the nodes that comprise the network results in a degree of truth, right? A state of information that all can agree on despite existing in an adversarial environment. So if you want to be a part of this network, you need to run a node. You can use the network without running a node, right? You can buy Bitcoin, the currency, to speculate on it or save and hedge against inflation. You can use the network to conduct Bitcoin transactions. You can mine and verify and conduct proof of work to compose transactions into blocks and hope to earn a block reward. And none of that requires you to run a node. Mining in the true sense requires you to run a node, but to produce hash and sell that hash to a miner does not require you to run a node. It just requires you to run a hashing machine. So there are a variety of ways to participate or to use the Bitcoin network, but the only way to participate in its creation, to be a part of that network, is to run a node.
I agree with that completely. I like to say that if you're not running a node, you're not really a participant. And I think that's an important distinguishing feature of what it means to run a node. Obviously, we need nodes for the network to be strong, for the network to be sufficiently decentralized. I think there are a lot of people who probably hear that and they say, okay, yeah, but I've seen estimates, there's 20,000 reachable nodes online. There are many more besides that. Why do I need to run a node? So for what's the benefit to someone besides network decentralization, which I think should be enough, but could you explain how an individual would utilize a node for their own benefit?
Sure. Yeah. And to be fair, I only answered your question halfway, right? I described sort of what a node is and how it relates to the Bitcoin network, not why you would want to run one. So I would argue that decentralization of the network, benefit to the network, is actually a secondary or even tertiary consideration when it comes to running a node. The primary reason that someone would want to run a node is to have total sovereignty over their financial transactions. When you run a node, you validate inbound transactions, aka when somebody sends you money, you are able to verify the authenticity of the funds received yourself. It's like having your own little light that you can shine on bills. Like if someone were to hand you a large bill and you want to know if it's counterfeit or not, you're going to take this light out of your pocket and shine it on that bill to see if it's counterfeit. And you trust your light because it's yours, right? It can't lie to you. And so you know that that money is real. And in a world where there's lots of counterfeit money going around, and that all money has the potential to be counterfeited, it's really a good idea to have a verification tool in your pocket to make sure that when somebody pays you, you know you've actually been paid in real money. And if you don't run a node, you are asking somebody else to use their tool, right? So if somebody were to hand me a large bill and then I were to turn to, a bank or some other trusted party and be like, hey, Bob gave me a bill. Is this bill real? I'm now asking them to tell me if the money I received is real, which means they could lie to me, right? I am now at their mercy. And again, in a world where authorities are betraying trust on a daily basis and with increasing frequency, you really shouldn't be outsourcing things as important as verifying the authenticity of your money to banks and governments and other trusted third parties when you can so trivially do it yourself. So the Bitcoin node is the equivalent of that little flashlight that can tell you if the money is real in the Bitcoin world. Running a node tells you with certainty that the money you've received, one, that you have received it, and two, that it is not counterfeit.
Yeah.
Second reason, go ahead.
Yeah. No, I was just going to say, I think that's such an underrated aspect of what Bitcoin enables. And until the switch is flipped for users of the Bitcoin network, that this is the don't trust, verify that we talk about all the time. I think a lot of people just reiterate that trope and they never really internalize it. And so they sit on the sidelines and continue to buy Bitcoin, leave it on an exchange maybe. Maybe they take self-custody, but not really. They're not fully sovereign. So I think you hit on there, I think, a very important point. I'm sorry, back to your second reason.
Number two is censorship resistance, right? The ability to send money. So the whole first part was about receiving money and making sure that it is valid. And the second part is, say, I want to pay someone else. Well, who do I have to ask for permission to do that? If I want to send you Bitcoin, and I want to do that without permission, I just want to send you Bitcoin, right? I want to open up my phone, send you some Bitcoin. The only way to do this is if you're running your own node. You cannot send Bitcoin to somebody without sending the Bitcoin to a node somewhere, right? Even if it's directly to a miner, that's still a node, right? A miner is running a node. So there's no way to make a transaction exist without handing it to a node. It's like trying to deliver mail without handing it to a postal worker. That's the only way your mail is going to get anywhere, is if you hand it to some postal worker. And in the Bitcoin world, there isn't even this concept of like delivering it yourself. I guess there is, which is if you hand them your private key. Like if you were to put Bitcoin on a private key, like a bearer asset, like an open dime, and then like give someone that open dime, then yes, you have successfully transferred Bitcoin without conducting a transaction. But if you want to send somebody Bitcoin via the Bitcoin network, via a transaction, it has to go to a node. So the question is, whose node, right? If it's not yours, it's someone else's. And if it's someone else's, they can tell you no. It's their property. And if they tell you no, then you have to ask someone else, and you have to hope that somebody is going to take your transaction. And in today's world, it's pretty easy to do. It's pretty easy to find somebody who will take your transaction. There's literally drop boxes online where you can just drop your transaction and it'll get sent to the Bitcoin network. That might not always be the case, right? Just like it isn't with fiat currencies. And so you should take measures to ensure that you will never be cut off from participating in the network. And the way that you do that is by running your own node. Because if you do, nobody can cut you off.
And so this is where like some of the node war stuff that comes into play is who's going to be willing to relay these transactions depending on the type of transaction it is, right? So what you're saying is that it would be trivial for if you're an exchange and you run a node, and so many people are relying on that node to effectively broadcast transactions to the network. It would be trivial for them, either through government coercion or their own determination that, well, we don't want to send that transaction. They just can opt out basically and say, sorry, you're out of luck. And your node enables that.
They could filter by IP address. They could filter by doing KYC. And there's like, hey, we are a gateway to the Bitcoin network. we accept transactions, but you have to fill out this KYC form. That wouldn't be effective in today's world because there's somebody right next door willing to take it without KYC. But again, the harder this clamps down, the ultimate end game of this is to run your own node, because if you hand the transaction to your own node, it can now flood the network without permission. It can flood the network without them even knowing where it originated. This is the whole point of the V2 transaction relay, as well as Tor and I2P, right? So the whole game is to get the transaction to a node, any node, anywhere. So long as that node is connected to other nodes, your transaction will make it, right? But it's getting it to that first node is where the choke point could happen. It's the on-ramp to the network. And then lastly, the last reason that someone would want to run a node, aside from the broad benefit to the entire Bitcoin network when people do the things I just mentioned, there is a third reason, which is political activism, right? So running a node makes you part of the network. And as a member of the network, you have a very small degree of influence over the what is and is not permissible on the network. And there are sort of two layers of political activism within the Bitcoin network. One is the policy, right? You can view this as like standards, sort of cultural standards and accepted best practices, right? This is like you go to a park and there's a sign that's just like code of conduct. This is how you behave here. It's loosely enforced, but if you abuse it, then maybe we'll call someone, it's just an acceptable code of conduct that everyone kind of agrees to, and then it works. And then the second layer is actually consensus, is the law of the land, okay, where you're setting hard limits on what can and cannot be done, and not retroactively. This is like proactive law. This is like you're changing the laws of physics such that skateboarding at the park just can't be done, right? Like this is what they tried to do during COVID. They like ripped up the concrete and filled it with sand so that you couldn't skateboard at the park anymore. That's consensus, okay? You're actually changing the physics and the ground to prohibit certain types of behavior, whereas the sign is more of the gentleman's agreement, so to speak. And nodes get to participate in both of those activities, both of those political processes, and in very different ways. And depending on which one, there are different degrees of power that different nodes have. Not all nodes are created equal, depending on which layer you are operating on. And we can dig into either one of those separately if you'd like.
Let's focus in on that. When you say that not all nodes have the same degree of power, what does that mean? Who has more power? Who has less power? What's the nature of that power? I think that would be interesting for folks to hear about.
Yeah, let's split the political powers into two categories, right? Policy and consensus, okay? And we'll talk about them separately. Let's talk about policy first. So policy is simply what your node deems to be a standard or non-standard transaction. A standard use case of Bitcoin versus a rare and non-standard use of Bitcoin. And this is your decision. Right? This is a personal decision. It's you making a local, personal, economic, or political decision on what you would like to see Bitcoin used for. Okay, so you're going to give these certain types of transactions like first class citizenship, and you're like, those I love, that's great. These things, don't want to see them, don't want them around. I don't think that they should be competing for mempool and block space with these other types of transactions that I really think are how I and others should be using Bitcoin. Again, a very personal decision, and these are highly tunable. So you can say like how much data in an op return output is permissible, right? Or how many transactions per second are allowed to enter your mempool. There's lots of little knobs that you can turn in the settings of your node. Most people never touch these things, right? Because they ship with very sane, very reasonable defaults, or at least they have for a long time. And so most people could just kind of plug their node in and know that it was, enforcing certain types of transactions or granting certain types of transactions first-class citizenship, and de-emphasizing and rate limiting other types of transactions. And so you tune this. And what happens is, so you tune your node how you want, and then I tune my node how I want. And Bob and Nancy, they all tune their nodes how they want, right? Everyone kind of makes this decision on their own. And it just so happens that if everyone agrees, right, if a super majority of people agree, like if I say, hey, I don't like opereturns that are bigger than 83 bytes, and I'm going to set that on my node. And then you say you don't like opereturns that are bigger than 83 bytes. And then everyone says that, right? Let's say that a super majority of people around the world say that. Then what it means is that any transaction containing an opereturn output of greater than 83 bytes just isn't going to make it around the network, right? Because I'm going to get it and I'm going to be like, I don't like these things, and I drop it, right? But maybe it gets to a node that is okay with it and it goes to forward it on, but 9 out of the 10 nodes that it forwards it to also don't like it and drop it, right? So you can see how probabilistically, the more nodes that are refusing to either store or relay a certain type of transaction, the less likelihood that that transaction has of flooding the network and eventually finding its way to a miner. And so, like I said, it's just a signpost. It helps limit that type of transaction. It's a rate limiter. A lot of people are using the word filter to describe these things. I think rate limiter is a much more accurate word, much more intuitive word. You are not eliminating anything. You're not outlawing anything. You're just putting a degree of friction in place in order to limit the instance rate of a certain type of transaction, so that you can optimize the network and minimize the fees for a different type of transaction that you think is more important than that type of transaction. So all you're doing is skewing the instance rate higher for normal standard transactions and lower for non-standard abnormal transactions. And so this is your political power here, and it's a collective power. You personally can't do anything, but if you and everyone else agree on what these policies should be, what these rate limiters should be, then they become highly effective and have been highly effective in Bitcoin for many, many years. Now, not all nodes are equal in this, right? So the more connected your node is, the more power it has in the realm of policy. Okay, so if your node is connected, outbound to 3 other nodes and inbound from one other node, you're kind of isolated, right? You're kind of like on the fringe of the network. You don't have a lot of connections to other nodes, which means you could be enforcing all sorts of policies, but not many transactions are even going to go through your node because it's not well connected. So the more well connected your node is, the more transactions it will see from other nodes, and therefore the more it will be enforcing its own local rate limiting policies, and therefore would have a larger effect on the network as a whole. So nodes that are connected over Tor, that are connected over I2P, that are connected over ClearNet, right, that are connected over CJDNS, if your node is using all of these and it's connected to hundreds of nodes all over the world using all these different network protocols, then your node is a first-class policy enforcing node. Now, still not a huge power, right? You're still just one out of many thousands of nodes, no matter how well connected you are. It's not like you are now wielding massive political power in Bitcoin. You still are absolutely meaningless if many, many other nodes around the network don't also agree with the policies that you have set. Okay, so that's policy. Mm-hmm. Any questions or comments regarding policy?
That makes sense.
Okay. Moving to consensus. Consensus, like I said, is a changing of the laws of physics. It is changing what is permissible on Bitcoin in the first place. It is not a rate limiter. It is an eliminator, okay? And nodes also decide this. So nodes have the power of policy and they have the power of consensus. And the way that they enforce consensus is both proactively and retroactively on transactions that they see on their way to a miner, and then on blocks that emerge from a miner. Okay, so a transaction gets handed to the network and it does not conform to your laws. Now, again, this is not a rate limiter. It's not like you're just dropping the transaction. Okay, you are now viewing that peer as malicious. Okay, they're a criminal. They're violating the law. And so if they try to hand you a transaction, you're going to drop it. You might even ban them as a result. And that's when the transaction is on its way to a miner. So as the transaction attempts to flood the network, it will get hard stopped in a very similar way as the rate limiting policy would have done. The bigger difference is once it gets mined into a block, like let's say that nodes disagree on the law. Some nodes are saying, yeah, A, B, and C are legal. And other nodes are like, no, C is definitely illegal. And so, the transaction is lucky and it finds its way to a miner that agrees with the first set and goes, oh, yeah, A, B, and C is fine. This transaction does C. It's fine. I'm going to put it into a block. And it sends that block out to the network. Same thing is going to happen. Nodes that agree with that law are going to accept this block as valid. And nodes that disagree with that law are going to reject that block. They're going to refuse to add that block to the blockchain and instead will favor a block that does not have illegal transactions in it. Not illegal in the jurisdictional sense. We're only talking about Bitcoin here. I want to be very, very clear about that. These are Bitcoin laws, not nation state laws. So maybe laws are even the wrong words, right? It's consensus rules, right? It's the proper technical term for these. And so as a node, you have this power. You can decide what is legal and what is illegal. But there's risk, right? So if you decide that, a certain type of transaction is illegal and that transaction's flying all over the place, like there's tons of them, and there's blocks being handed to you with that transaction and you're refusing to put them on your chain, you have essentially just seceded from the network. You are no longer a part of the network. Okay, you are you just disagree with the law of the land, right? You've emigrated. You're out. You've moved to another land. There's some nuance there in terms of whether you are differing from the network in that you are allowing something that nobody else allows, or you're differing from the network in that you disallow something that everyone else allows, right? So are you being more permissive than other nodes, or are you being more restrictive than other nodes? And this has consequences, right? Which one it is matters. Now, before we get into that nuance, which we probably should, the degree of your political power in this realm has nothing to do, I shouldn't say nothing, it has almost nothing to do with how well connected your node is, right? Unlike policy, that is the only real lever of whether, of how powerful your node is how well connected it is. In the realm of consensus, connectivity doesn't really matter that much. What matters instead is economic power, economic weight. How important is your node, economically speaking, to the broader network? And not all nodes are created equal. So unlike policy, where you have weak nodes that are only connected to, say, 10 peers, and you have powerful nodes that are connected to 100 peers, right? Neither of them are very powerful. You could be the weakest node or the most powerful node, but you're still this big. You need everyone else to agree with you, okay? But in the realm of consensus, this is not true. One very highly economic node, economically important node, could be worth as many as 10,000 uneconomic nodes, right? Like, there's a huge difference between a not powerful node and a powerful node. Massive gap. It's like the difference between a beggar on the street and a senator, right? Like, massive difference in political power on the Bitcoin network. So what do I mean when I say?
Could you explain that? Like like who are the powerful nodes, the economically powerful nodes, and why?
Yeah, economically powerful nodes mean nodes that other people are using to engage with the Bitcoin network. Mm-hmm. Okay, so if everyone was running their own node for their own transactions, the only economically powerful nodes would be businesses, right? So businesses who are buying and selling products with Bitcoin using their own node are economically powerful nodes. For example, Start9, right? Start9 is not the most economically powerful node, but we sell real world physical products in exchange for Bitcoin. We accept Bitcoin as payment, and it goes through our node. we validate that transaction through our node. So other people around the world, namely our customers, are using our node. They may have broadcast the transaction through their own node, right? Probably not, since they're buying a server from us. It probably means that they want to run a node. So they're not yet running one, but they didn't broadcast the transaction through our node. It's that our node did the verification. We hold the power in that transaction, right? You're handing us a bill. It's up to us to verify the authenticity of that bill. If we don't think it's authentic, we're giving it back to you. We're not accepting your money if it's not authentic, right? So if we, as a company that people want to buy products from, is looking at a bill and saying, we only accept bills that have blue marks on them. This bill only has red marks. We're not taking it. And if other businesses were to agree with us and be like, oh, yeah, no, we only take bills with blue marks. If it has red marks, we don't take it. Well, then suddenly nobody wants bills with red marks on it. Because you can't spend them, right? Nobody's going to take your bill if it has red marks on it. And that was decided by the businesses, by the people who were selling goods and services, individuals and companies who were willing to accept Bitcoin for their goods and services, decided what Bitcoin was in this instance. Do you understand? They're saying, I want this thing. And so if they want that thing, then it means other people want that thing, because it's the only thing the businesses will take in exchange for their goods and services. So those are highly economic nodes. As it stands, there are other very economic nodes as well. There are mining pools, right? So when someone is running a little Bidax miner at their home and they're pointing it to a remote miner, and they are not running their own node, right? They're not doing their own block template construction locally using something like Datum or public pool, but they are instead just basically selling hash to a miner, somebody who is running a node and constructing those block templates. Those nodes are now economic nodes. They're willing to purchase hash in exchange for Bitcoin in order to mine. And so they are economic nodes. You have exchanges. So things like Kraken and Coinbase, massive economic nodes, right? If you want to deposit Bitcoin to Coinbase, they are validating that transaction to make sure you're not giving them counterfeit Bitcoin. And so you can imagine how much money, how much Bitcoin is being deposited into Kraken and Coinbase on a daily basis and being validated by their nodes. That makes them extremely powerful economic nodes. Because if they were to stop accepting a certain type of Bitcoin that, had red marking on it, to stick with the analogy, then suddenly people would be like, well, I don't want Bitcoin with red marking on it because Coinbase or Kraken won't take it. Please don't use Coinbase, by the way. But they won't take it. So you don't want it either because you can't send it to an exchange and sell it for fiat money. Not sure why you'd want to. Don't do that. But I'll throw in a few little
we need to point people in the right direction.
Yeah, little pieces of advice. Don't use Coinbase.
Don't sell. Don't use Coinbase.
Yeah, don't sell and don't use any exchange. But if you need one, don't use Coinbase. So anyway, they're economic nodes. Another one would be wallets. So a lot of people use Bitcoin from their phones, right? So you download some app on your phone, like Bull Wallet, which is my favorite Bitcoin Lightning wallet on the market right now. You download that to your phone, and by default, that app, right, that you've downloaded to your phone is going to connect to a node that is owned and operated by Bull Bitcoin. And this is necessary, right? Because if you don't run your own node, then you need one. So by default, all wallets connect to a node that is owned and operated by the person who built the wallet, which means de facto, they are a powerful economic node because most people, if we're being honest, don't switch the default to use their own node. They just stick with the default, which means everyone who's downloaded that app and is using it to send and receive Bitcoin is actually sending and receiving Bitcoin through the company node, not your own, right? However, good wallets like the Bull wallet allow you to change that. You can go into the settings and say, oh, instead of using the the node that is run by Bull Bitcoin, you can use the node in your home. Then now you have that economic power and corresponding political power, right? You've disempowered the massive economic node that everyone was using and taken a piece of it for yourself. And so those are the economic entities in Bitcoin. You have the exchanges, the pools, the wallet developers, the people who ship wallet software, phone and desktop. You have businesses, right? Merchants, individuals, and businesses selling goods and services. And then you have the consumers, people who are buying goods and services, buying and selling goods and services from each other.
Do you view any of the sort of the inherent centralization of these economic nodes? It's far fewer exchanges, for example, than there are individuals. Is that a risk? Is it a problem, or is it just an inherent aspect of the network?
It's inherent. I think it's fairly well balanced, right? There's far more decentralization in node operatorship than there is in mining, for example.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Mining is much more centralized. Mining is a problem at the moment.
Mm-hmm.
And long term, I think there are some interesting trends that are helping and will continue to help decentralize mining. But in terms of economic power on the Bitcoin network, it's fairly well distributed, right? So I just named quite a few different entities.
Right.
I mean, the pools are huge, and the miners are the mining pools are huge. The exchanges are huge. The merchants are huge. And so, yeah, I think it's fairly well distributed.
Okay, so my intention when we kicked this off wasn't necessarily to do like Node 101, but I think that really sets the stage well for people who are sorting through this. And there are a lot of people asking questions about core versus knots, BIP 110, what's going to happen? Where do I land on this sort of spectrum of believing Bitcoin is money versus it's just a decentralized file storage, or a lot of opinions. Start9 got itself not into a mess. I mean, I don't think anyone has any issue with your product. We personally love it. But the Start9 Twitter account was sharing some thoughts that were taken to be an endorsement of Bitcoin knots. And I think you told me in Vegas that really wasn't what the tweet was. Could you describe what the tweet was that caught fire, and then where sort of Start9 as a company, or maybe you personally stand?
So there definitely was not like a tweet. This has been like an ongoing saga,
Sure.
for at least a year. So to rewind a little bit, right? Let's go back to the beginning. I'll tell you a little story here.
Yeah.
So back to 2019, when we decided to start this company. We knew then, and even used language in late 2019 around this concept of like Bitcoin citizenship, right? Which was not novel. It's just something we were orienting around. And we didn't want to be like hyperbolic about it. We didn't want to like exaggerate the importance or the political power gained by running a node, but we did recognize that ultimately it is the nodes that compose the network, the connected, maintained, economically important nodes that comprise the Bitcoin network that do and would continue to define what Bitcoin is and what its future holds. This was not the only, but was sort of the supreme political power in Bitcoin, right? There's lots of political constituencies in Bitcoin. And I talked about this at the Bitcoin 2025 conference. And I would encourage anyone here, because I'm not going to rehash that whole conversation right now, to go watch that talk where I talk about what are the 5/6 political constituencies of Bitcoin, what powers do they have, and how do they exercise those powers, and how does it result in a very elegant balance of power, more so even than the three branches of government that compose, for example, the United States system. Bitcoin has 5 or 6 branches of government. And in my mind, the most underestimated and ultimately most powerful branch of government is the economic nodes. Ultimately, they hold the trump card. They are collectively, acting collectively, can basically strong arm the rest of the network into anything that they want. So if the economic power in Bitcoin collectively, meaning the mining pools, the exchanges, the wallet developers, the merchants, and the consumers all get together and decide that they want to make some new law, everyone else is eating it, right? The miners are eating it, the exchanges are eating it. And again, it doesn't have to be everyone agreeing. It's just that as long as the weight, right, is in favor of a certain change, the nodes will carry that vote. They have that power.
Is that specifically with respect to Relay? Because I assume, like Coinbase can just decide, 21 million is not enough. We're going to change something at the consensus layer. No one's playing along with that. Are you speaking specifically to policy?
No, this is both.
Potentially?
Yeah. So the nodes acting collectively at the policy layer can absolutely effectively rate limit transactions. Right. This is a non-debatable factual statement, right? Like if 95% of the nodes on the network want to limit the instance rate of a certain type of transaction, it shall be limited, right? Mm-hmm. It doesn't mean that transaction is illegal or forbidden or can't be sideloaded to a miner with added risk and added fees and added inconvenience and all the rest. But it just means that it will be rate limited in the peer-to-peer network, period, right? And so that is a highly effective political power. It's just not a nuclear power. It's not violence. It's civil. It's civil powers. It's people agreeing to agree in a civil society, right? But if that fails, and this is what my speech at that conference got into, is I did not advocate for, but I predicted with shocking accuracy, by the way. If people were to go back and just listen to some of my podcasts and read some of the tweets that came from me and the Start9 account over the last year and a half, and for a second take off the blinders about what you think intent is and just read the statements as fact and how it all played out so far, it has been to the T. Okay. And what I predicted at that conference was, I said, because this is back when the policy war was raging. We won't call it a war. The policy debate was raging, right? And knots was garnering adoption at like a shocking rate. And we were selling servers like left and right for people who wanted to run Bitcoin knots. What I claimed there was that, okay, this is the civil political activism in Bitcoin right now. You have a legitimate expression of discontent. You have willingness to expend economic, right, to purchase physical hardware in order to run software that expresses your opinion about what you want Bitcoin to be, and that people were taking to the streets. This was a form of protest, right? The migration from core to knots was a very real, very genuine protest that we don't need to get into the gritty details of, but it was a political protest. And the way that protest was dealt with by the incumbent powers, we'll call it, was basically the Tiananmen Square. It was like total disregard, right? So you have in the real meat space world, when people get upset about something in mass and they start doing something, they start moving economic purchasing power from one company to another, or they start marching in the streets, or they start breaking things, there tends to be this very seasoned response from the incumbent powers. Like they know how to deal with civil discontent, right? So it's listen, right? It's accommodate. Eventually it is usurp and conquer. So it's not, I'm not saying it's necessarily a good thing how the, incumbent powers in meat space deal with civil discontent, but they at least know how to deal with it. They have a degree of tact, right? They've learned from history where it's like, hey, if everyone is like marching through the streets and switching from one brand to another or demanding, immigration rights because they need to get out of here, you probably shouldn't just go in and start shooting them all, right? Like that's only going to it's only going to add flames to the fire. And that's basically how, for lack of a better word, the loose organization and affiliation known as Bitcoin Core dealt with this situation. Right? It was very poorly dismissive, condescending, elitist, and ultimately forceful. Ultimately just like a shut up and take it, right? And so at that conference, I said, if that is the way that this goes down, if this is not dealt with in an appropriate manner, the response of the nodes is going to be to stop playing at the civil nice layer, and they're going to take it to the legal layer where they have the only nuclear button. No other political constituency has the nuclear button except for the nodes.
That's BIP 110, I assume.
Correct. Yeah, this ultimately manifested in what is now known as BIP 110, where the node operators, the people who were upset with decisions that were being made and in the manner in which those decisions were being made, stopped playing nice. Basically, they said, okay, well, we tried policy. We tried to rate limit these things. Right? We didn't want to make them illegal. We just wanted to differentiate them, first class versus second class type of citizenship and transaction. But now, because that was denied, we are going to we're going to create a law that makes them illegal, and in the process, wipes out, or would, if enacted, would wipe out a fairly significant amount of capital that has been invested in and around the protocols and new application opportunities that those changes that were originally pushed back against, like the op-return change, enable. And so that is where it currently is there is now a movement to change the laws of physics. And ultimately, as I stated earlier, that is determined by the economic nodes. The economic nodes decide what Bitcoin is, period. That is the nuclear button in Bitcoin politics. The question is, do the economic nodes have enough weight and consensus to push the vote forward? That is the open question.
Okay. So I think I listened to the talk that you referenced. It's been a while, though. I'm going to take you at your word that the predictions have all more or less come to pass with a high degree of accuracy. How do you see BIP 110 the next couple of months? And then I guess just sort of projecting to the future what this might look like. What's going to happen? Because I think there are a lot of people who are saying, just fork off, like if you want something different, go a different direction. A lot of people who I've talked to are very enthusiastic about the traction that BIP 110's gained and think, yeah, it's certainly going to activate. Where's your head at? And by the way, are you cheering on activation? And then what's your prediction about activation?
Okay, so yeah, before we get to the future, and I'm happy to talk about all that, you had originally, what I gave was background on an original question around like our own perception and tweets and all of that. So,
right.
Or posts, I guess, now that it's X. So what we have done, by and large, okay, not to say that there is no like opinion,
bias,
of course,
and
we uphold our right as individuals and as a company, because Start9 is not some like mega corp owned by the shareholders and a board, and no, we're like a couple individuals, right? And it's supposed to be that way. Start9 has a personality. The company has a personality, and it's basically a mesh of me and Aiden, right? And the other people who are part of this company. In our community, like that is what gets expressed, and we think it's perfectly appropriate for companies to have opinions. I can't believe people push back against that, but anyway, what those opinions are has been largely misunderstood. Okay, so mostly what we have done as a company is upheld as a principle, as our core principle, is user sovereignty. Okay, that's what we stand for above everything else, no matter how strong our opinion is about something. User choice, user sovereignty. We are building computing systems that put people in charge of their own computers, including what software those computers run. And we do everything that we possibly can, which has its limitations, by the way, because defaults are unavoidable, right? Because UI design inherently has opinions in it, even if you don't want it to. It's like hard to keep yourself out of stuff, right? But we do everything that we possibly can to create a neutral technology, a technology that puts the user in total control by telling them what's what, by giving them all the information that they could need and the buttons to act on the combination of the information and their own desires and wills. That's what we do. And that's what we have stated repeatedly. When it came to the policy debate and now the consensus war, the pending fork, mostly what we have done, I'd argue 90 to 95% of what we have done is observe, state what we observe, right? Say, hey, there's a duck, right? Like just observe things and say them factually, and then make predictions. We've said, okay, We see a duck. We also see a coyote. We predict that this coyote might see that duck and chase it. That's what we have done, 95%. What everyone reads in there is, why do you want that coyote to eat that duck? That's what they hear. Because that's X. That's social media. That's human tribalism. Where do you stand? Do you want the duck to get eaten or no? It's like, we see a coyote, we see a duck. We think that coyote is going to chase that duck, and that duck probably won't get away, so it's probably going to eat that duck. And everyone's like, you want the duck to die. Okay, we didn't say that. I'm not saying we don't have an opinion. I'm just saying that that has been our public stance from the get-go. Trying to call it like we see it, trying to predict what comes next as best as we possibly can, because we think information should be free, is free, and that the more information that floods the world, the better. Because the more information people have, the better they can make an informed decision. And so I have never held back in sharing information that I see. And we have a first-class view to this. There's thousands and thousands of people out there buying servers to run nodes to be politically active in Bitcoin. They're buying them from us. We talk to them in our support channels. We hear them in emails. We know what they're thinking. We know what they want. We know how they feel. So we actually have a vantage point here that you'd think a lot of people would be interested in hearing. But every time we've managed to state anything that we're seeing, like last year, I published our sales figures. I wasn't bragging. They weren't even braggable, right? Like, I'm not proud of a couple $1 million in sales in a year. Like, we're a pond. We're a fucking tadpole on a pond compared to other computer companies. I published the numbers to verify what others were observing on the network, which was a rise in Bitcoin knots node count. And there was a lot of people out there being like, these are Sybil attacks. These aren't real nodes. They're just people spinning up nodes.
Yeah.
They're bots. And I was like, no, they're not, guys. Like, look at our sales numbers. I'm telling you, these are real nodes by real people who really care. This is not a fucking Sybil attack. And again, sharing that information was viewed as like an endorsement of knots or an endorsement of BIC 110. Again, I'm not saying anything about my partners, anyone at the companies, or Start9 as a company's opinion right now. I'm just saying that that observation was just information for the world to have so that we could have a better debate, so that we could have a better conversation. But it wasn't welcomed or accepted in that way. And so
yeah, that's the tribalism coming in. That the whole point being, the data suggests that real people are spending real money to buy real hardware and spin up a node, and perhaps other things. By the way, like sovereign computing extends beyond running your own Bitcoin node, but probably largely, I think a lot of people know you guys as you guys make hardware that they can easily run a node, and immediately people go to this, well, you're trying to prove that Knots is, picking up steam, and so you must be Team Knots, and you have this opinion. And we talked a little bit at Vegas. I know to some degree your opinion, which you can share in as much detail or not as you'd like. But I think that's a great use case of sharing knowledge, because it is helpful for people to understand whether you like it or not. It doesn't matter which side of the fence you're on. There is a real movement. There is real discontent at the way that Core handled this particular change, and it is the word I use is dismissive. And we're seeing it too, by the way, and not just Knots nodes, but I mean, we have literally spun up over the last couple of years thousands of nodes. We've helped users spin up thousands of nodes. Yeah, I know.
I have a good vantage point.
Yeah, you see it coming in, and these are real people. These are real clients. We're working with them. We're training them, helping them configure their node, and to me, that's the signal, is that there really is something happening here, and not just a bunch of bots or something like that.
Correct. No, this is a real discontent from real people who really care about Bitcoin, and it's a shame that it's gotten to where it is. I have had ongoing conversations privately with multiple people from what would be broadly classified as the core camp for over a year now. Not like daily or anything like that, but there are back channels, and I have tried to leverage whatever clout and communicative abilities I have to help try to avoid, what's coming in August. Um, but unfortunately, at this point, I think that it is an irreconcilable difference of opinion about what Bitcoin is and what it should be, and that I am no longer I no longer have any hope that a fork will be avoided or will be non-contentious. At this point, we are heading towards a contentious soft fork, and like any war, entering it is a dark corner. You don't know what's going to happen, and oftentimes the ones going in yawning and bragging and with total arrogance are the ones surprised when their enemy punches them in the nose. And when you start bleeding, you change your mind real quick. So
So,
I don't know.
so, so you've obviously you don't know with certainty what's going to happen. If you were to pull out your crystal ball, what do you think you'd see here in August? And maybe explain what's been proposed, what we're talking about, the activation of BIP 110, and then how you think this plays out.
Well, it is a fascinating experiment at the very least. Okay. Historically, this is a really interesting moment for Bitcoin. Regardless of how it goes, many lessons will be learned, and it will be, studied in retrospect to see how and why it went down the way that it did. So stay tuned. It's going to be a really interesting couple of months. Here's kind of the factors at play, because it's not simple. All right, this is complex stuff. So an attempt to oversimplify it is a mistake, which is what a lot of people are doing. I'm not going to do that, and I'm also not going to pull out a crystal ball, so to speak. I'm going to kind of give you a little bit of the players and the lay of the land, and then we'll see what happens, because I don't know. But BIP 110 is a restricting of the consensus rules, right? It's a tightening of the consensus rules. What that means is that things that used to be allowed are no longer allowed. All right. It is not adding new features. It's not like, hey, that thing used to be illegal, now we're making it legal. All right. That is a hard fork. When you take something that used to be illegal and you make it legal, it's a hard fork. And you can think of a hard fork as a cessation from the union. It is basically one state or one province of a larger state saying, we no longer want to be a part of this. We're leaving. We're forming our own nation, and issuing our own currency, right, by default. So, and that is why it is an airdrop, right? So hard forks are inherently the creation of a new token, a new set of rules, and that's it. So this would be like Bitcoin Cash, right? It was a hard fork. And it doesn't need to result in two chains, right? So for example, if everyone goes along with it, so let's say Texas was just like, we're out. We don't want to be in the United States anymore. And then every other state, every other state in the union was like, we're going with you. It would basically just be Texas moving the United States to Texas, right? So it would be the same set of states, the same set of people with a new name and a new law. So if everyone goes along with the hard fork, then you end up with a single chain, okay? And a single currency. The chances of that happening are basically zero. I can't even imagine a scenario where that could happen. I think it happened once in Bitcoin's history, and it was when it was very, very, very small, and it was like an emergency because it was a runaway inflation bug, and so they were hard forked to a new network, basically, and everyone on the old network came over because nobody wanted to be on that network. So the only way a hard fork, I think, could work in modern Bitcoin is if there was a similar type of existential imminent threat that everyone agreed with, and I just don't, that's not really possible. I don't see that. Maybe the edge of science fiction possibility, quantum, maybe, but probably not. So anyway, that is not what BIP 110 is. BIP 110 is not a cessation from the union. BIP 110 is a tightening of the consensus rules. It is a group of people saying things that used to be allowed are no longer allowed. We are going to prohibit those things going forward. And the analogy here is a coup. Okay. The more proper analogy for a soft fork is a coup. It's not Texas leaving and saying we're forming our own nation. It's Texas invading Washington and trying to sit their own governor in the White House, right? In order to change the laws of the land to be more tight, right? To be less permissive. That is a soft fork. And in a soft fork scenario, as in a coup attempt, you don't end up with two countries, right? What happens if you try to overthrow the government and it fails? You
You
don't get
get
to go.
eradicated. Yeah.
Yeah, you don't get to go form your own country, right? You might be able to secede had that been your intent from the get-go, but you don't get to like attempt to take over the network and fail and live to see the next day. You're done for. And so that's what is at stake here. So temporarily, you could end up with like two states, so to speak, two chains, right? So if when BIP 110 activates, as soon as a block is found that has illegal transactions in it, right? These new non-compliant transactions, nodes and miners on the network that are part of the legacy group will accept that block. Nodes and miners that are part of the BIP 110 chain will reject that block, right? So I shouldn't have said chain. There's not two chains yet. It's all one chain, right? Until somebody mines a block that has a newly invalid transaction, there's one chain. Everyone is still happy, right? It's like even once BIP 110 activates, it's all still one country. There's just been a declaration of coup. There's been a declaration of war. There's been no split yet. But as soon as a non-compliant block hits the network, the chain will split. And you will now have a BIP 110 chain and a core chain. And then it's off to the races. Now it's an arms race. Okay, it's a hashing race. And there will be some luck involved here as well, which adds a whole other element to history here, right? Like you can actually, luck might play a part in Bitcoin's future. A small part, but still. And so the two chains are now going to race to the future to accumulate the most proof of work, okay? And whichever chain succeeds in accumulating the most proof of work in the ensuing, I don't know, n
Not
number of
real
blocks.
long. Yeah,
We
I was
don't
gonna
know.
say
We
not
don't
real
know yet.
long.
We don't know yet, right? Like there's not a lot of precedent here, but not very long. Like possibly single digit blocks. I mean,
Right.
it could be less than 10 blocks. Like this could be very fast, or it could drag out. It kind of depends, right? It depends on how deep and people are willing to dig in, how much risk they're willing to take. But it's off to the races. And if after a few blocks, it's very clear which one is running away, right? Like, oh my God, all the hash is over there, all the hash is over there. The other side is done for. They're done. It's over, right? There's no coming back. You cannot catch up to a runaway train, a runaway chain, right? I like the analogy there. It's a runaway chain. You're not going to catch it, okay? It's okay if it gets a little bit ahead, even a few blocks, right? But if it gets really far ahead and there's no indication that it's going to slow down, the other side has to capitulate. You're now on a shitcoin, right? Like, you're not going to keep going. Nobody wants to be the shitcoin here. This isn't Bitcoin Cash. Bitcoin Cash wanted to be a shitcoin. It's like their stated intent. They're like, we don't want to be Bitcoin. That thing is not Bitcoin. We're going to start this thing over here. Nobody wants that here. The core side, the not side, the BIP 110. I don't even know what the camps are called anymore, but everyone wants to be Bitcoin. And so whatever Bitcoin is going to be, which is defined by the most proof of work, the chain with the most proof of work is Bitcoin. That's what everyone is going to converge on. However, everyone has dug in so deep on this, like socially, reputationally. There's so much all in here. Everyone has, not everyone, a lot of people have really staked everything on this. Their reputation. That they're not going to be able. I mean, they might, and if there's mercy on the other side or a degree of tolerance or acceptance, maybe. But I don't see a real reconciliation here. Somebody's getting wiped out. Like come activation time for BIP 110, we're either going to lose. Again, not every person, and not lose as in they're dead. Just like Bitcoin's going to lose a limb here. You understand? Like we have now reached the point of war. You don't get out of that without consequences. Bitcoin is losing a limb, period. The question is which limb? Are we going to lose the core constituency, right? The maintainers, a lot of the contributors, both in code and finance, right? People who are contributing money to Bitcoin development, core development, contributing time, energy, and code to Bitcoin core development, maintaining that code, as I believe 5 maintainers currently do, and their, we'll call it like influencer ecosystem, right? So some of the more prominent influencers like Adam Back, who have been very, very aggressive on this side, or trolls like Shinobi and stuff like that. And I hope, sorry, he's a troll. I don't care which side of the fucking debate you're on. That guy is a douchebag coward.
No.
So anyway, so that's either we're going to lose them because they've gone all in on this, right? They are not living in a knots world. I'll tell you that right now. If BIP 110 succeeds, they're rage quitting. They have to.
Mm-hmm.
If they don't rage quit, then oh my God, then everything they said, I just don't see it. I don't see how they stick around. Save face. Nobody can save face here. So that's one camp. Or we're going to lose the BIP 110.
Luke
camp.
Mechanic. Yeah.
Well, I would call that actually the equivalent of like the Adam Back and Shinobi. It's neither one is a troll, by the way, but the influencer camp around it. What is the actual core of the BIP 110 side, right? So on the core side, who actually represents that? Who we're losing? Who's getting carved off of Bitcoin is like the contributors, the developers, the maintainers, the financiers, the people who have funded and contributed to Bitcoin Core, the code base and project. Okay, that's who we're losing. Then there's this surrounding influencer class, right? The podcasters and the celebrities and the trolls that are all around that group, right? They sort of, yes, it's all one camp. I'm just saying there's sort of 2 categories, right?
Yeah.
Then on the not side, you have the same thing. But who is the core of that side? What is the analogy on that side of like the developers, the financiers, the contributors on the core side? What's that analogy on the not side? Can you guess?
No.
It's the plebs. It's the people.
Who now are faced with the question of, is Bitcoin still what I intended for it to be? Is this what I opted into?
You have thousands. Okay, there aren't that many nodes in the world. It's like 20,000 reachable nodes. Okay, a ton of those are people who genuinely believe that should we continue down the track that Core has led us, Bitcoin is doomed in the long run. Not imminently, but that it sets us on a track to be usurped by the legacy system and, perverted and usurped and overtaken. All right. Mm-hmm. Co-opted is the word I was looking for there.
Yeah.
And so what are they going to do? What are they going to do if BIP 110 fails? I could point to a couple thousand immediately and be like, they turn off their node. I'm not saying they sell their Bitcoin. Maybe they do. Maybe some do. I wouldn't advise it. But they turn off their node. They lose interest, right? So we might not lose these people in the true sense of like they vanish from Bitcoin, but the energy drops to 0, okay? Like the BIP 110, the essence of the BIP 110 side, the essence and beating heart of it is extreme ideological cypherpunk passion. It's like gritty ass political activism. It is basically the people, right? Again, not carrying all the economic weight, not politically influential in meat space. It's just the people, in a sense that Bitcoin was made for, right? It's the people who want to save in Bitcoin and use Bitcoin and abandon the fiat system, and who are libertarian politically, or anarchist even, and or cypherpunk, and basically just who like perfectly align with the essence and ethos of Bitcoin as it has always been, are going to be completely disenfranchised and deflated if this movement fails. Along with them comes their representatives, the influencer class. So Luke, Mechanic, and others. They sort of all go down together. Now, I don't know what
That means precisely.
Chris Guida and Mechanic and Luke are going to do if BIP 110 fails.
Well, yeah, that's what I was going to ask is like, could you see a scenario where they say, okay, like the most peaceful means by which we try to get back on track failed, we're going to hard fork and see if they can bring the plebs with them? Or do they just give up? Like what's...
No, there's zero chance of maintaining an alternate coin and network.
Yeah.
Not a single person that I have ever talked to, big or small, powerful or powerless, on the BIP 110 side of this, have any desire whatsoever to fork off the network.
Yeah.
This is a coup attempt.
And
it almost sounds like a negative word when you say coup, right? Is an attempt to take control of a network that they believe has taken a very wrong turn, in order to turn it back. That's what this is. And if they fail in doing that, every person now has to decide for themselves what it means to them. Are they rage quitting? Are they holding Bitcoin and hoping it goes up, even though they no longer believe that it can deliver on its promise for open, global, decentralized money? I don't know what they're going to do. I think everyone has to decide for themselves. Some might say, I was wrong. This is fine. I just didn't see it before. Others might be like, well, this sucks, but there's nothing better. I'll just go along with it anyway. Others might be like, screw this. I'm selling. I'm out. I'm burning the house. Like, I don't know. Everyone has to decide for themselves. Yeah. But somebody's getting disenfranchised here. It's so unfortunate. It's so unfortunate. I really, really didn't want this to happen. And I saw it coming from a very early stage, and I was talking to all the right people, and I'm not special. I just was in a position to try, because I knew some people, and I feel like I kind of have an understanding of both sides, and I was trying to really align interests, and I thought that we had the proposal. So Aiden at Start9, our CTO, and I came up with a proposal that we, to this moment, believe is the solution. Everyone wants this. We have the ultimate compromise. It's not even a compromise, because in a compromise, the perception is that you had to give something up to get something, right? That's kind of how people think about a compromise. This isn't a compromise. It's literally everything that you want, you get, both sides. Everything that the core side has stated that they want, they get with our proposal. Everything that not side has stated that they want, they get with our proposal. It was literally spit on by the core side when we presented it. You familiar with the term distributed totalitarianism?
I'm not.
Distributed authoritarianism. Distributed authoritarian. It's made the rounds on X. There are literally people with it in their bios where it's like, I'm a distributed authoritarian. Okay, just like think about those two words for a second. It makes no sense together, right?
Right.
This is what our proposal was called. When Aiden submitted our proposal to the Bitcoin mailing list, Greg Maxwell, in a matter of minutes, responded with a historic rant. I encourage people to go look this up. That was so emotional and violent against the proposal that he had the audacity to, in that response, cite our proposal as an example of distributed authoritarianism that needs to be avoided. What he meant by that was that when all the people get together and decide that they want something, that thing happens. He called that distributed authoritarianism.
Not freedom, not sovereignty,
Not
not the
people
right to
agreeing.
choose. Yeah.
Yeah, correct. Like, and so what we should do instead was listen to him. It's like, it was the most insanely authoritarian response to an insanely freedom loving democratic process. Democracy has problems, don't get me wrong. Our proposal was not majority rule. Our
Yeah.
proposal was overwhelming supermajority rule. It was like, hey, in this proposal, if and only if everyone and their mom agrees on something, it happens. And he was like, oh, no, you don't. I'll tell you what we're going to do, you distributed authoritarian. And this like made the rounds. It was really funny for a few days because it just made no sense. I got multiple private messages from core contributors, from people on the core side apologizing for his response because it was so outrageous. Like everyone was just like, what happened to Greg? Greg's a legend. Can't even imagine what happened. It makes no sense. But anyway, we had the proposal.
So, okay, we're already past an hour, so I want to be respectful of your time and and also the ability for everyone to zero in on some of these concepts. I guess maybe my last question for you is, I think you and I are generally in alignment on a lot of this stuff. There's been a lot of talk about core being captured. Okay, and that could mean probably a number of things. Are they bought and paid for? Are they philosophically I don't know, drifted? What's your take on why? Hang on, let me just step back for 1 second. The whole op return thing for me, what just made no sense wasn't like, I actually went and read like the mailing list, and I think that there is probably technical merit on both sides. I think one side is stronger. I think that there are smart people who can make a case for either side. What I thought was completely unforgivable was the way in which the change was, in my view, just rammed through. It obviously, I mean, you talked about the numbers that you showed for a number of new nodes. People are running knots. It's not just a Sybil attack. And they just they were dismissive. They pushed it through anyway. That was my biggest complaint. Was it just pushed through because of Citria or because of funding or because of some sort of political capture? What's your view on why this played out the way it did when to your point, it didn't seem to have to?
Unfortunately, I have not read the 3-part series of investigative journalism that Hodlonaut recently published. It is at the top of my list. I'm very, very busy these days. And I had, AI throw together a quick summary just so I could sort of prime myself for it. But I do intend to read the entire thing. I've seen enough, both from the summary that I consumed as well as the chatter around it, that I'm convinced it's worth reading. I'm convinced that he is a genuinely good actor who is performing one of the greatest feats of modern investigative journalism that we've actually seen, right? Most journalism is just opinion wrapped up in fake, or half-assed investigations. I think that he did the proof of work, and I cannot vouch for the accuracy of anything because I haven't read it or validated it myself. But I do intend to get deeper into the specifics of what happened in and around the Bitcoin core. Again, broadly speaking, it's sort of a loose organization and affiliation, but what happened in and around Bitcoin core over the past 5 to 10 years, probably not 10, but going back, 5 to 8 years. So I'll have a stronger opinion once I have done my own research. Without reading those, already have done some, so I can comment to a degree on some of it. I know that I know because they say it very, very bluntly and very openly, that there is an intent on the core side to expand the use cases of Bitcoin to essentially anything. The goal is arbitrary use case, ultimately. Within the broader constraint of censorship resistance, privacy, to the extent that it can even be done in Bitcoin, but definitely censorship resistance and permissionless. I think that there is a genuine attempt by many people on the core side to create a censorship resistant, open, borderless, permissionless something, right? And the something is ideally for them anything. They
Mm-hmm.
want to create an open, borderless, permissionless, whatever, computing machine,
Yeah.
data machine, a computer, a global computer, right? This is basically how Ethereum
I was gonna
advertised
say,
itself.
yeah, sounds
Literally, the
familiar.
advertisement on the website, right, was the like the global computer to be used for anything and everything. Because right, it's all just information. Right? This is their stance. It's just information, guys. And what we need is a permissionless, censorship resistant way to share information around the world. And this is their explicit stated intent for Bitcoin. And as why that intent existed is unclear to me. It is unclear whether there was leadership in core that genuinely wants this, believes this, and managed to sort of convince everyone else in conversations like any team has. Whether this was financiers, right, the people who were paying them, sort of pushing this, and also seeking people. So people like Gloria Zhao, right, who very explicitly is sort of an Ethereum head, right, like from the crypto, DeFi kind of vein of all of this, and very much wanted to see Bitcoin go in that direction. Again, I'm not putting words in her mouth. This is her stated intent. Very much they want DeFi and smart contracts and arbitrary data and all the rest. It's like Bitcoin needs to compete with Solana and Ethereum. Like these things are doing so much more than Bitcoin does, and Bitcoin needs to catch up and do it too. We need to be more like them. We need to be more like Ethereum, guys. That is it. That's the culture. That's what they want. That's what they've
Yeah.
said. Now, they want it to be proof of work and bigger and more robust than Ethereum, right? They would argue that a lot of the reason that Ethereum and other networks haven't made it is because they didn't have the adoption. They didn't have the network effect. They didn't have the hash power to protect the networks. They didn't have the culture of strict code review and et cetera. They shipped. They were highly centralized. But from a technology standpoint, they actually admire these projects, right, for what they've achieved in their zero knowledge proofs and rollups and smart contracts and DeFi technologies. And however, and I'll say this as a side note, to date, none of that has actually been demanded by the market, right? So like these projects from a Rube Goldberg machine standpoint are very impressive, but there's other than
Doing things, they don't really provide value.
well, they enable NFTs, they enable JPEGs, right? They enable speculative markets. I would argue is the one and only demonstrated use case of public blockchains and cryptocurrency networks is speculative Ponzi-like endeavors where people sort of create assets, hype them, dump them, and move on. That is what it enables. I'm not saying there isn't something there in the future. I'm not saying that there couldn't be, truly decentralized financial solutions such that people all over the world can have access to credit and futures and savings and interest bearing accounts that are based on Bitcoin. I'm not saying all that's not possible. I'm just saying that at present, that these things have never been successfully used for those purposes on any meaningful scale. The only thing that they have been used for is to perpetuate scams. And that I would argue that entire future world of truly decentralized, open, borderless finance that everyone should want is only possible if it's on the basis of a truly open, decentralized, permissionless monetary base that is truly and wholly outside the constraints of banks and governments all over the world. Cart before the horse. You have to get the money right first before you can build anything on top of it. But we're so excited about the things that might come next. Some of us, not me, right? Like I'm mostly focused on the money. I'm saying some people are so excited by the use cases, more use cases, that they can't wait to build them, and so they're building them now before they're needed, before there's any market demand for them. And ultimately, whether they intended to do it or not, ultimately they end up being a scam, right? Whether that was their initial intent or not, that's where they all end. So anyway, that is an explicit intent, okay, on that side of the argument. That's what they want to turn Bitcoin into Ethereum, Bithereum, okay, and I don't want that, right? So at this point, it's probably clear which side of this that I'm on. I'm just always very careful because what is even more important to me than my personal opinion about Bitcoin, which is something I care about very deeply and want to see succeed for the sake of my family and my grandchildren and for the whole world, is open and free information, right? So on a more meta level, I actually completely agree with the core side about what I want for the world in terms of do anything with a computer that you want, right? I just don't think that computer is Bitcoin. I think that computer is a computer. I think it's a server. It's you run a server, I run a server, and we can share information all day long, right? And it's censorship resistant because there's no middleman, no custodian. So it's like to achieve a global censorship resistant, redundant, available network for arbitrary data, it's called the internet. And we have that. Mm-hmm. We have a global computer and network for sharing information in an open.
And you can have your own node in that network. You can buy a Start9 and you can have your own node.
Yeah. That we have the thing that so many people are claiming we need and trying to build as an app on the thing they're claiming they need, right? So it's like me saying, like, okay, we have an oven that cooks food. So I'm going to try to make food that cooks food. It's like, what are you talking about? The oven cooks food. What food do you want to cook? They each have an identity, right? You can cook a pizza or you can cook a steak. But if you try to cook an oven, that's Ethereum. It's like, what are you doing? You're trying to build the internet on the internet. Stop it.
Yeah.
It's just an app. It's an app. Bitcoin is an app. It is not the internet. Mm-hmm. It doesn't need to do arbitrary data. The internet does that. We just need to decentralize the internet by proliferating servers. That's it. That's all the internet needs to be decentralized is more servers, more people self-hosting. Bitcoin is an app. What is that app? It's money.
It's the decentralized money.
Yeah. Yes, it's open, borderless, permissionless money. Stop trying to make it do more.
Dude,
it's just a grift. It's just a grift.
Yeah, I think that's a good place to wrap, except I have one final question I always ask. What is an unpopular opinion you hold? Bonus points if you offend some Bitcoiners with it. You've shared a few, but if you've got anything else.
I'm a huge advocate for arranged marriages.
Ah, interesting. That's the first of its kind. Okay, well, you want to maybe explain briefly why?
To be clear, I'm not against forced marriages, just arranged, right? Meaning the kids don't have to do it. Like, you're not going to be like, you will marry that person or some consequence ensues. I'm just for the practice of arranging marriages for young people. I think that they are not suited to do it for themselves. I think that knowing what is going to be best for you in your long run, you need to be a part of it, for sure, a part of the conversation, as arranged marriages have always been. But I think that we lose a lot in society by adults not taking the initiative to matchmake and arrange partnerships for their children and loved ones.
Okay. Well, as a guy who is eagerly awaiting my third daughter, I think I can sympathize with this opinion more than probably I could have years
Well,
ago. So,
unfortunately, I already have three daughters. Because otherwise, you
uh,
and I might have had something to talk about here if they were three boys. But
yeah, I got one. I got one boy for you. So,
oh, do you? Okay, good.
yeah.
Well,
So he's going to be a sovereign individual. So maybe we
yeah,
can chat.
we'll talk. Yeah,
Awesome, brother.
I
Well,
got three really great girls.
awesome. I've got two girls and a boy now, and any day now we're expecting the fourth. So yeah, man. Well, hey, it's always fun talking with you, Matt. You bring a wealth of knowledge. Really appreciate your time. Tell people where they can find Start9. Anything else you want to share with them?
Well, we're not hard to find. Start9.com. It's a really crappy website that we haven't updated in like 4 years, but we've been busy and we're getting to it.
Yeah.
StartOS 040 is here. It's beautiful. It's amazing. It's better than we thought it was going to be. It's better than you thought it was going to be. Technically, it's in late stage beta right now, but it is absolutely production ready. We're using it for all our production servers. Many people around the world are using it for their production servers. So if you haven't updated 0351 yet, go and get it done. All servers that we sell now are coming with 040 pre-installed by default. We don't even offer 0351 anymore. Consider it a deprecated, abandoned operating system. We're not doing updates for it anymore. Get on 040. It is night and day better. Start Tunnel is an amazing cloud product that you can throw up on a VPS to have a virtual private router, right? It's instead of your home router, you have a router in the cloud that you can then use to create virtual networks and do ClearNet hosting without exposing your home IP address. And Start WRT is our router operating system that is now complete and will be selling routers. These are home routers, physical devices that will go in your home. Start WRT is, in my opinion, my humble opinion, the best router operating system the world has ever seen. It is fully open source, and the router that we are selling it on, the physical hardware, is also open source based on a RISC-V architecture, maximally open source that a hardware product can possibly be in the world. So a fully open source router from hardware to software, maximally powerful, yet insanely easy to use. I think we have the best router in the world. We are currently pre-selling it on router.start9.com.
Fantastic. You guys always make the best. So really appreciate it. Matt, grateful for your time as always. Always a fun conversation with you. We'll catch up again soon.
Yeah, it was fun. Thanks, man. See ya.
Cheers, man. And that's a wrap again. Hope you enjoyed my conversation with Matt. I know I did. I always learn a lot when I talk to him. He can go deep on so many technical topics, but just a smart guy, great guy to chat with. Go check out Start9. We are huge fans of all that they do. And of course, if you need help taking your Bitcoin into proper 100% self-custody and running your own node, signaling whatever it is that you want to signal, go to thebitcoinway.com/podcast. You can schedule a free 30-minute introductory call with our team. We can also help you with online cybersecurity and privacy, setting up a privacy phone. We've got a Plan B residency program in Panama. Many people need to consider that today. You've got to have your Plan B in place. And again, that's thebitcoinway.com/contact. And follow us on X. Do me a huge favor. Go over there at _. I'm also there as well at the other M Jordan. Make sure you like this episode if you enjoyed it. Make sure you're subscribed to our channel as well. Really appreciate anything to help feed the algorithm. And until next time, stay safe, stay sovereign, and remember the yield on Bitcoin is freedom.